Well, good morning and welcome to Integrative Preparedness. How are you all today? Well, we have a little bit more information on the situation in Lewiston, Maine, the mass shooting up there. I want to talk a little bit about that. They haven't caught the guy, of course. And last night when I made my first video on this, they had very, very limited information, as always happens with these things. So I got up this morning and to see what I kind of expected them to have caught him by now. They haven't, which brings up some interesting thoughts that I'll discuss in a minute. First off, so we have the shooter's name is Robert Card, apparently, or the suspect. Okay, the person of interest. His name is Robert Card. He is they describe him as a firearms instructor, a member of the National Guard. Now, whether he was a firearms instructor in the National Guard or the military or just, non-military, it doesn't say. I'm getting my information here from the Daily Mail. Interestingly enough, I always find that we get the first best information from outside our country. Isn't that interesting? I have seen a couple of things on Breitbart that include some of this information, but so far, with the exception of pointing out that he was a Trump supporter, the domestic media is not filling in a lot of gaps. So I'll just take this and realize, this is still early in the situation, and things can change. What we think we know now, and that's the danger right now. We have to realize that we don't know, we think we know. And what we think we know now could change. And that includes with law enforcement. And remember that whatever information is being fed to us here is being fed to us carefully. And some, may be true and some may not be. And it's not just the information itself, but how it's packaged. So they say that this Card, what is he? He's 40 years old, and I have to say, well, I won't say that surprised me, but a couple of things did surprise me. Initially, the initial death count. 22 dead. That takes. If people are running around, and also apparently used an AR, which our domestic media was, quick to point out two things, right? First off, he was a Trump supporter, and he used an AR-15. 22 dead with a 223-5.56. That's, I had expected it to be maybe a larger caliber. And those of you who know what I'm talking about. That's pretty darn good shooting when it's, you can imagine the chaos that ensues when an active shooter starts, especially in a large open area, like a bowling alley or whatever. So anyway, 22 dead, 60 injured. It says, and here's interesting. He's believed to be an Army reservist stationed out of the city of Saco. Is it Saco? I don't know. I've never been there. Saco. Believed to be. This is interesting, too. With a phone call, they can verify whether he was or not. He recently reported hearing voices and threatened to shoot up a military training base, and then spent a couple of weeks apparently in the hospital for mental issues. They have not caught him, and it shows that apparently he was single. That's going to be another thing they're going to throw into this. Another angry single white male, and recently lost his job. There are a lot of flags here, that may be true, and they might just fit into the narrative, right? MK Ultra anybody, right? So those things together, he's 40 years old. He's apparently an Army reservist. He was a firearms instructor. He was apparently single. He obviously was going through some issues with mental health. lost his job, spent a couple of weeks in a hospital because of mental issues. And it doesn't say, they don't go into what they were. They don't know, they don't go into, and maybe they're just not ready to put out the information yet, or maybe they haven't decided yet what meds he was on. But their course, as you know, as we all know, they're going to make the issue the gun, and not the fact that there were some mental issues going on here. I'm not going to get into that whole. You all don't need me to get into that whole argument. Although I know, I welcome you to put your thoughts in the comments because they're all good, and it's all going to be, it's the mental health issues. It's not the guns. Now here, this brings me to something interesting in that, and I've decided I am going to put up. I'll put my video, which I'm going to make after I'm done with this, on surviving active shooters. I questioned whether I was going to do that just on Patreon or put it on YouTube as well, because when I put stuff like this on YouTube, it just kind of brings a lot of people out of the woodwork that will come into the comment section and say things, maybe well-meaning, I don't know, but say things that they really don't know about. And that has a tendency to mislead other people who might read it. And people ask why I take off comments. Okay, I'm not here to try to get as many, to be controversial and try to get as many comments on there as possible to drive the algorithm and all stuff. I'm here to teach. I'm here to teach things that I know. And so this is not really an open forum for everybody to express opinions, although, opinions based on knowledge are always welcomed. But it does bring out people who, think they know. It's one of those things we don't know, but we think we know, right? And they will express opinions that they don't realize are wrong, simply wrong. And maybe even sometimes they're trying to help, but that would mislead people who don't know. And that's why I will take those comments off. And so I'm going to put my video that I'll make on surviving an active shooter. I will put it on YouTube, but I will not allow comments to remain that will mislead people whom I'm trying to educate. Okay, does that make sense? Y'all understand that? I'm not trying to be a big meanie or anything. You just take off comments you don't agree with. No, I take off comments I know to be wrong and misleading. So there you go. So the interesting thing on this is that what I see, even though everything is feeding into the narrative that they want, like I said, angry, mentally, mental issues, white male lost his job, big thing, firearms instructor, military, they've checked all of the boxes there. But in most cases, well, let me put it this way. What I found was interesting is that they haven't caught him. Okay? They haven't caught him. Now, Lewiston, Maine, smaller town, right? He evidently was from another smaller town. Now, Lewiston, I looked it up, it's like 37,000 people. The town he was from, which name I don't remember, I read it, but I didn't care to remember, is from a town of 3,000 people. So here again, it's one of those things that these things don't just happen in big cities. Okay, they don't just happen in the suburbs. These are small towns. These things can happen anywhere, and I will reiterate what I always say: anything can happen anywhere to anyone at any time, and that's why it's up to you to be the responsible party in making sure that you are safe and secure. But anyway, they didn't catch him, and that's because I'm sure that law enforcement was sparse in that area. In a town that big, you don't have that many people. I mean, you have the city police, and then they'll call in the sheriff's department, and then they'll call in the state police, or whether, I don't know if they have a state police or a highway patrol. You'll call that in, and of course, obviously, the feds have all jumped all over it. ATF is there, FBI is there, and they're going to tromp all over this thing. But by the time, and apparently it happened in 2 locations. See, that says it, and I haven't read how much time might have spread between the initial contact when he started shooting and when he ended shooting, but it was apparently 2 separate locations about 4 miles apart. So that shows you that there is a there was a span of time there allowing for law enforcement response. Now, what would happen, one of the things that will confuse this, hang on a second. Okay, one of the things that could have made this a little more complicated for law enforcement is that with limited law enforcement that is in a town that size, they get the first report of the first location. And so everybody goes to that location, right? Which means that when he goes to a secondary location and starts shooting that up, law enforcement now is, all headed towards the first location. I won't try to imagine what might have happened there, but all these things can go into making things more difficult. Anyway, that's the interesting thing, is that they haven't caught him. Now, here's a person who, with a military background, National Guard. I have no idea what his job was in there, but it obviously shows he had an interest in that direction. The fact that he is reported to be a firearms instructor, and again, they just made that claim. They haven't said who he was a firearms instructor for. That shows his interest in firearms. It probably would indicate to me, if I were running the investigation, that he's probably comfortable, and it wouldn't be surprising to me at all if they start saying, well, if they find out he's a prepper, or a survivalist, or someone who is comfortable in the woods, or someone who doesn't like the way the country is going, all of these things. And one of my first thoughts was Eric Rudolph. And, we will see. And I'm not saying that that's what is going to happen. I'm saying that it wouldn't surprise me if they don't find him. Now, it will have a lot to do, and I'm speaking as an old investigator here, it will have a lot to do with his associations, with the quality of his associations. That's who they will be looking at first. Family, friends, co-workers, everybody who had an association with him is going to be interviewed. And that's one of the ways that they will try to track this. If he was a loner, that's going to make it a lot more difficult. We don't know the situation of him being separated from his job, so that make it. And it might, now, whether he's really being driven by the voices in his head, or whether he is being driven by thoughtful process, or a little bit of both, this would go into the possibility of a lot of pre-planning of this situation. How much planning did he put into this? That's going to be, I was going to say, interesting to discover. Who knows if we will ever discover it, and so often will we hear the truth. They'll come up with a lot of information. Now, depending on the agenda with which they enter this investigation, and there are great investigators. There are great, even on the federal level, there are great investigators who will go and follow the evidence. There are also those who will follow their agenda and try to make evidence fit their agenda. So, as it goes through that meat grinder of decision-making processes, the truth of the matter it can come out pretty close to the truth. It can come out all mangled. And so, by the time we hear about it, and somebody will write a book about this, in a few years, depending, especially if he's on the run for a while. Now, for all I know, they've already caught him. I don't know. But these are my thoughts. If he has put planning into this, he's done this, and now he's scooted the boot, and he's out there in the woods somewhere, or maybe not. Maybe he's hiding in plain sight, and depending on how much planning he's put into it, we will see. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say at this point. I've got a lot to do, but I'll be following this. I'll check in through the day and we'll see how this turns out. But again, you know, all of the boxes that they needed to be checked have been checked here. And some will say, well, that's because that's the profile of a shooter. Well, yeah, to an extent. Or is that the profile that's been made to be of a shooter? Ah, gracious, shall we go down that road? Well, we don't really have time for that, right? Okay, we'll keep this in mind, and remember that you are the one responsible for your safety everywhere, all the time. So I'll leave you with that. Remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. And the preparing well today has to do with understanding that anything can happen to anyone, anytime, anywhere. That's what you have to plan for and be ready for. Okay, you all have a good day, and I'll talk to you probably in a little while later today. Bye-bye.